Hey, what's up, guys? Since I buy much less comics now, I guess I have some money left over to buy magazines about comics. Right? Alter Ego. Actually, It's a series of magazines published by this publisher. This is the one they do. You see in the newsstands, but in the comic stores, you have these. Back issue is one, and comic book creators the other. I have two of these so far. This one in particular, the one with Stephen Bissett, and I have another one with Timothy Truman. Okay, the guys, the Joe Kubert crew, right? Basically school, who are probably some of the better. They're the sweet spot of comic creators in terms of the skill these guys had, and the stories and sensibilities they were able to get across. But and back issue too, I'm gonna probably go over some of these too for content, but. Alter Ego is also good. What I thought was interesting is I always like to learn something new. I must be nuts, right? Obviously, the pulp style comic book empire of Street and Smith. See, now what got me to this was the Shadow. I like the Shadow, right? The Shadow's cool, right? But when the pulp style comic book empire of Street and Smith, I had no who the hell is Street and Smith? I don't know. Right? And the whole thing, like when I went over with the Bizarre Archives #1, the idea of pulp, pulp fiction, pulp stories, okay, and the pulp style comic book empire. Okay, so now essentially with this company, well, let's just get into it. Essentially, these guys here were the founders, as you can see, like the remind me of the Luden brothers, right, from Reading, Pennsylvania. Obviously, these guys passed away in the 1880s, but pretty much after the Civil War, right, the time period I always find the most fascinating in the West. Time after the Civil War and before the First War, right, World War. Magazine publishing became a thing, right? Lippincott's, right, magazine, and from Philadelphia was a big one. But in New York, obviously, it became a publishing empire. The technology increased to the point where you can get stuff out. And in terms of populism, right? Everybody from all over wants to get their finger on the populism, right? In order to gain a real power or save the civilization or whatever. But I always argue, you always see it in what are the people buying, right? Eventually, as magazines went, Street and Smith started publishing dime novels, right? They call them dime novels, dime store novels, cheap stories for people to read. Here's some examples of look at that, 1900, that's awesome. Was that 1908? The old fin de soleil art. But how, going forward from the dime novels to pulp magazines, right? These stories that were popular amongst the regular folk. And you see when the other people start to take over, they try to go in other directions. Okay, the dime novel, the pulp fiction is what's popular. What the difference between the pulp stuff is and the dime novels are, I'm not too sure. Although there's a mention here of a wildly successful romance. I guess you could say pulp magazine dedicated to romances for the ladies, right? Right, and it became very popular. Okay, more people were able to read, right? So ignorance will be extinct. Anyway, I like the old photos. I like history. Look at the old publishing. They look like looms, right? Like in a sweatshop. But essentially, they went into pulp fiction, right? And people had different ideas of where they wanted to go, right? This guy here, the grammar, he moved them into a skyscraper. Oh, look at those things. Picks up the foil like a cocktail. Yeah, well, this guy here, apparently, he wanted to go into the more high end, and I think Street and Smith actually ended up doing that, I think, with the fancy cosmopolitan type magazines later. Now, this is where it becomes interesting for me and for the link between pulp fiction and comics, okay? Basically comes in here, right? What is this? Right. They proposed, finally said, hey, let's get into this comic book thing, right? So essentially, this is where they started to go into comics, right? Right. As he saw the slick paper format was the future of print magazines. Okay, that's like the Cosmo and all that stuff. He also saw the potential in the upstart child of pop culture, the comic book. So now we're going from people publishing pulp fiction into publishing comic books. You know, And it's interesting they bring something here also, that the main reason Street and Smith didn't enter the comic field much sooner was they printed all their magazines, right? So they had their own physical plant, right? They had their own. They were able to make their own thing and distribute it, right? Which is not too different from what the internet is, the web is right now, right? In terms of the plant was not equipped with color presses, right? The early comics were originally done in color, right? Black and white didn't become a popular thing. It was more associated with news strip papers, but became more popular later in like certain, like between the Japanese and then some of the stuff in the 70s. Yeah, so it's interesting. So he actually just, what did he do, right? Yeah, he moved forward. He sent the printing to another firm. So they contracted the printing out to someone else, which was a big thing for these guys. So anyway, in terms of the intellectual property, I hate that fucking term. In terms of what comics are they going to make? Well, they already had pulp characters. They had the Shadow, right? It was like a no-brainer. Of course, the Shadow. But what's interesting, you look at the Shadow. The Shadow's kind of cool, right? He went from being, originally, according to the history of this is why I find it fascinating, right? Originally, the Shadow was just a guy, like the narrator of like these early radio thriller serials. Then eventually he became a character, and then like a crime fighter, right? I remember the Shadow comic that DC had in the 80s. That was actually an interesting comic. Kyle Baker's art was crazy, if you remember who I'm talking about. The Shadow was great because the Shadow he seemed kind of evil. He seemed kind of dark. And he killed guys, right? He had the 245 cals. And he would just, there was no mercy for criminals, right? I like that. You go through, this is interesting here. Iron Monroe. Now, I've heard of this. I remember, if you remember the Young All-Stars, you had the guy that was supposed to replace Superman after Crisis, because there was no Golden Age Superman anymore, right? It was based on this character who's actually from a pulp novel, okay? Interesting. The Mightiest Machine. The whole idea was that, once again, going off the John Carter template and reversing it, right? You have a space colonists who end up on Jupiter, okay, instead of where they were supposed to go. And the gravity is so heavy there, it makes it difficult for them to survive, but they manage to do it. They toughen up, and then the children that are born under this gravity are obviously very powerful. And this one, he ends up going to Earth because there's some kind of alien conspiracy going on. And on Earth, right, he moves 3 times as fast, right? Like that. That was easy. They move slow on Earth, right? So this is essentially, there's, like he's jumping around. They surmise that Superman was sort of a takeoff of this character, okay? In terms of the novel, this comic came after Superman. So this is interesting. I think this would have been a great character to do something with more, but I don't think much more was done with them. Remember, this is all popular stuff. Who are the people buying? What are they not buying? If it wasn't getting bought, it wasn't getting published. I know, it's insane to think that they were so close-minded back then. So you see some of the other stuff too. I'm assuming that these are like the original black and whites before being printed. Like some of the Carrie Cashin. Hey, look at you. What are you after? Merrywell College. This is a character going back to the dime novels of some young Harvard lad having adventures or something. Of course, who's this other guy? The other guy who's going to become real famous is Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze. And you have other guys here. Nick Carter's another one, Super Sleuth. Bill Barnes. Hey, Mac. The Talking Tuck. This is where the craziness of a lot of these stuff. I mean, this stuff here seems fairly conventional, although the Shadow is not, and neither was this character. But then you get stuff like the Talking Toad. What the hell is this? Like an unknown character using a toad, using ventriloquism. Now we get into some of the other stuff here. You see Doc Savage start to develop, okay? Once again, a famous pulp character. Easy to cross over here. The Whisperer, right? Some of these guys didn't last too long. Cap Fury, right? But then you start to get a little crazier. Like, you remember Blackstone the Magician? I remember this dude. I remember hearing his name. They made comics about this magician having adventures. Oh, look at that. And then this cat, I never heard of this. There's basically this kid, right? Supersnipe. These were kind of like funny stories where this kid imagined he was a superhero by putting a towel over his neck. Right. Right. The boy with the most comic books in America. So it's kind of a funny book. Apparently, this ran until 1949. So it was kind of almost like a spoof, somewhat, you know, of superhero comics. As while superhero comics are coming out. Right. Go through here. The Hooded Wasp. But just craziness of it, right? Crocodile Queen. I don't know how long these characters lasted, but you know, Ajax, the Sun Man, right? Bebo, what's up, Bebo? And obviously Tarzan takeoff. So it's just fun. But I wanted to get into what is this? Some of the things. Obviously, while these comics are coming out, you're gonna always have these villains. But this dude, this was like this. I'd like to see reprints of these, right? For the boys and the girls. Red Dragon, right? Right. I like this here. Red Dragon. Red Dragon is a kid, grows up in China, right? A guy, you know, a foreigner. I guess his parents are missionaries. The Jap war machine killed 2 Americans, his parents. And now through the knowledge of ancient magic, he makes the Japs regret that they killed his parents. Right? Now I shall make them regret it more. This dude is crazy. Red Dragon is like, you know, basically a Guaylo, all right? A foreign devil growing up in China, learning Chinese magic, and supporting the Chinese people, and in revenge to annihilate the Japs. I just think it's funny how the writer here keeps bringing up that he's very racist, right? Right. The most murderously racist hero ever, Red Dragon. Mind you, this racist says the only good fascist is a dead fascist. Nuance. Of course, referring to the ancient term of race, which is, you know, the Chinese would consider themselves a race, having nothing in common with the Japanese, and likewise. He often uses magic to kill Japanese soldiers en masse, even when they took no action against him. Right? So I just thought it was cool, right? Right. Why does a crawling to reach the kill? Is the nature of these beasts. So also with the Japanese, right? They talk about demonizing the enemy, but a Red Dragon just seems, I don't know, he just seems cool because he's so hardcore back then. And is he racist if he supports and helps the Chinese people? Right? So, so, and of course the war had an effect, right? They had to cut back on publishing and all that. So just crazy stuff. And of course the Shadow, man, the Shadow's villains had to be even crazier and creepier than him. So that's always a plus when you get to this stuff. So, and I'll wrap this up real quick with an interesting thing at the end. So, quick, I like the heroes that didn't make it. Okay. Some of the interesting ones here, I like this Captain Jack Commando. Yeah, the spirit of liberty, right? Fighting for plutocracy. Oh, wait, sorry. The Chuck Magnon, Immortal Man. Right? Chuck Magnon, get it? Like Cro-Magnon. So Cro-Magnon who became immortal. That's always an interesting thing. The Iron Ghost. So this dude becomes a robot. You know, I think that's interesting. Oh, Kung Fu. The Avengers of Kung Fu. Look at that. You have, what is this? An evil, racist America. You have a man of color whooping this hood. Oh, that'll show you. Man, amazing, right? If you really look. Anyway, the Minuteman. Hey, I'm for liberty. Okay. Oh, wait, I'm in debt after the war, and I'm in debt as prisoner. Mr. 13, this guy was like a multi-personality dude who was essentially an insane hero. Didn't last too long. Phantom Flyer. Yeah, get them Nazis. But yeah. yeah. Oh my god, there you go. Just a reminder, buy more war bonds. In 70 years, the city you live in is not going to be a shithole. Anyway. And the last one here, I'll finish it off, which I like here, right? Tranzo. Who's a little like Houdini, but you have a hero, Tranzo, okay, who essentially is able to either hypnotize people or become different characters, which is very interesting. He becomes, ooh. I guess Tranzo is a proper name for. So it actually seems like a cool idea, but it's very, in the context of today, it is even funnier. So And it was a good article, interesting, good stuff, and then it just follows up here with more stuff of the authors. Hey.